Live World War II explosives, temple idols, medieval traps, and undiscovered shark species, these are more unexplained objects pulled up by fishermen. In 2022, off the coast of Block Island, Rhode Island, a fishing crew pulled up something way bigger than their usual catch, a World War II depth charge. It was a 520-pound explosive packed with 267 pounds of TNT, snagged about 4 miles offshore while they were dragging their nets. The crew immediately called the Coast Guard, who brought in the Navy's explosive ordnance disposal team from Newport. The Navy took the device and safely detonated it underwater, about a mile from the shore the next morning. The depth charge was from a 1945 naval battle, when U.S. ships hunted and sank a German U-boat, dropping nearly 200 depth charges into the water. One of them never went off, until this fishing trip nearly 80 years later. In September 2025, off the northern coast of Kerala, India, a fisherman named Rasal was hauling in his net when something unexpectedly heavy and solid caught his attention. When he pulled it up, he found 2 brass serpent idols, each weighing around 11 pounds. These were not ordinary trinkets. They were detailed, solid figures, the kind usually kept in temples. Rasal didn't know what to do with them, so he took them back to shore and handed them to police, who had no idea how they would have ended up in the sea. So they've been investigating all possibilities. There is a possibility they were stolen temple relics. Serpent idols in Kerala are often connected to traditional worship of snake deities. Finding them tangled in a fishing net is extremely rare. Along the Severn estuary in Wales, a group of traditional fishermen were out at low tide, and something weird showed up in the mud. They weren't expecting treasure, just the usual nets and debris, but instead they pulled up ancient fishing baskets, hand-woven from willow and hazel. Martin Morgan, one of the local fishery leaders, explained how these things worked, saying, "The baskets would have been baited and pegged to the estuary bed at low tide. The catch would have been green eels and lamprey. Storms had shifted the sand and mud, and that's what finally brought the baskets back to the surface after hundreds of years underwater." Experts say other baskets from the same spot date back to the 12th to 15th centuries, so these are basically time capsules from the Middle Ages. The fishermen were pretty stunned, holding up pieces of history they didn't even know they were fishing for. In 2017, the new Bedford Fishing Heritage Center in Massachusetts invited local fishermen to bring in all the bizarre and downright unbelievable things they'd pulled up in their nets over the years. As you can imagine, there were some stories. The center's executive director, Laura Orleans, talked about some of the objects fishermen had hauled out of the deep, saying, quote, "Over the years, I've heard about all the crazy stuff people have pulled up, from torpedoes to human body parts to airplane wings to fossils, everything, even including a kitchen sink." At what they called the first Unusual Catch Day, crews brought in their weirdest hauls so maritime archaeologists could help identify them. Some of the items were so unexpected and old that researchers couldn't immediately identify them. Some were small, some were huge, but it all reminded everyone that fishing nets don't always just catch fish. Sometimes they haul up long-forgotten mysteries from the past. In the summer of 2023, out on the North Sea off the west coast of the Jutland Peninsula in Denmark, fisherman Rene Kloster was doing a routine trawl when his net snagged something heavy, very heavy. A 26-foot undetonated World War II torpedo weighing over 2.5 tons. Kloster posted about the find on Facebook, saying, "It's not entirely harmless to be a fisherman. This morning we caught this torpedo about 8 meters long and approximately 2,500 kg. He added that it would be detonated about 3 miles off the channel, and that it was huge, the biggest he'd ever seen. He later confirmed authorities did blow it up safely. The torpedo was lowered back down and handled by professionals who detonated it away from the coast so no one else could accidentally haul it up again. This wasn't Kloster's first torpedo though. He said it was actually the third he'd pulled up in his nets. From Reddit user SeaDogSam77 comes this next story. Was out near a shallow sandbar off the Oregon coast a few months ago. Just me and my old drift boat. Pulled in my net like normal, expecting crab traps or seaweed, and something caught my eye. Tangled at the bottom was a small, smooth bundle of something wrapped in seaweed. At first I thought it was just driftwood or trash, but as I untangled it, I realized it was a small carved figurine, about the size of my hand, with a face etched into it. The wood was old, dark, and smelled like the ocean had soaked it for decades. The detail was unnerving. The eyes were tiny pits. I didn't know where it came from, and before I could even think of taking it home, the tide pulled the net sideways and it slipped back into the water, gone before I could grab it. I've been back to that spot many times since, but nothing else like it has ever shown up. In 2022, a deep-sea angler in Australia named Trapman Bermagui was reeling in his line from about 2,130 feet down when he pulled up a shark with huge, bulging eyes, rough sandpaper-like skin, and a mouth full of exposed teeth. It was sort of grinning like the shark from Finding Nemo. People online were amazed by this one. One commenter said the image was the stuff of nightmares. Another said the shark's evil smile gave them major creeps, and nobody could agree on what kind of shark it actually was, because it's the internet, and it's 2026. Nobody can even agree on the color red being red these days, let alone what kind of rare shark is hauled up from deep underwater. The fisherman insisted it was a type of rough-skinned shark, also known as an endeavor dogfish, saying it's common in depths greater than 600 meters, but another researcher said it might be a deep-water kite-fin shark. Whatever it was, seeing a creature like this pulled up from the deep is a reminder that most of what lives down there is still almost alien to us. This next Redditor said, "I've been fishing for 20 years and I still can't explain what we hauled up last week. We were working a deep water stretch about 150 miles off the coast. The hull felt heavy, like we'd snagged a piece of shipwreck. But when we finally got the net onto deck, it wasn't scrap metal. It was a large, heavy ball of tightly woven copper wire, roughly the size of a tractor tire. It looked man-made, but there were no bolts, welds, or seams. Inside the mesh was a solid core of what looked like black glass or polished stone. Even though it had been sitting in the salt water, it was completely clean, no seaweed, barnacles, or slime. And it was a scorching day. The deck was hot enough to burn your feet through thin boots. When I brushed my hands against this thing, it felt like pulling a tray out of a deep freezer, and it stayed freezing cold for the 3 hours it sat on deck. Whenever we got close to it, our handheld radios would just kick over to static. My captain didn't like the look of it. We ended up winching it back over the side just to get our electronics working again." There have been stories about the Hawkesbury River in New South Wales for a long time. Reports go all the way back to the early 1800s of a mysterious creature lurking in the water, and the description has barely changed over the years. People say it looks a lot like Nessie. Long neck, bulky body, with 4 flippers. The natives were talking about the creature long before European settlers arrived. They warned newcomers to be careful near the edge of the river and spoke about a dangerous being living in the water. There's also Aboriginal rock art in the area. It's around 3,000 years old, showing a long-necked animal that lines up almost perfectly with the descriptions people still give today. But one of the most unsettling stories comes from the 80s. A fisherman was moving along the Hawkesbury in a small aluminum boat when the water around him suddenly darkened, and then it started to churn. He said the surface rippled like something huge was rising from below. And before he could react, something slammed into the bottom of the boat. The impact was so strong it launched it 6 feet into the air. The fisherman was thrown into the river and immediately started swimming for shore. He said the creature followed him at first, closing the distance before suddenly veering off and diving back down into the water. He made it to land, shaken but alive, and never went back on that stretch of river again. Back in 1976, a US Navy torpedo recovery ship was out at sea doing routine research work, dragging a big cargo parachute through the water. At some point, the crew realized they'd hooked onto something huge. Whatever was attached to the chute started pulling back, hard enough that the ship was actually struggling to reel it in, and for a while they were just in this tug of war with some massive creature down there. But then, without warning, the resistance stopped. They finally hauled the parachute back up. They found the reason. A massive shark had gotten tangled in it and suffocated after swallowing part of the chute. But as soon as the crew got a good look, they realized this was not any shark that they recognized. It didn't match anything in the books. The mouth was enormous, the body shape was strange, it looked completely different from great whites or basking sharks. It's around 15 feet long and weighed roughly 750 pounds. Turned out, it was actually an entirely new species. That accidental catch became the very first known example of what we now call the Megamouth shark. Sightings of these sharks are still very rare, but we know they exist now. Since the first one was pulled up by sheer accident in 1976, fewer than about 100 Megamouth sharks have ever been documented worldwide. And that has been the video for today. I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next one.